Before I sign anything, I told the mediator, I need to submit one document into the record. The room went very still. My wife, Diane, was sitting across the long mahogany table from me, her hands folded neatly in her lap, the way she always folded them when she was certain she had already won. Her attorney, a tall woman named Patricia Voss, who charged $400 an hour and wore it like a badge, had her pen hovering over the settlement agreement. My son-in-law Ryan was seated 2 chairs down from Diane, supposedly there as a supportive family member, because that's what Diane had told Claire, that Ryan was just there for moral support. I had known for 11 months exactly what Ryan was really there for. The settlement on the table would give Diane 40% of Marsh Construction, the company I had built from a single pickup truck and a used nail gun when I was 26 years old. 37 years of concrete work, roofing jobs, crews I trained myself, contracts I won with handshakes and kept with hard work. The business was worth a little over $2 million. Patricia Voss had argued with great confidence that Diane deserved her share. I was 63 years old. I had survived a heart attack, a triple bypass, and 38 years of marriage. I was not going to sign that paper. Mr. Marsh, the mediator said, a tired man named Gerald who had clearly hoped this would be a routine morning. This session is for finalizing agreed-upon terms. You reviewed this settlement with your counsel. I understand that. I looked at my attorney, a quiet man named Douglas Firth, who I had specifically chosen because he did not flinch easily. Douglas gave me a small nod. I reached into the leather portfolio on the table in front of me and slid a single manila folder toward Gerald. This contains financial records, I said, that I believe the court needs to review before any agreement is signed. Diane's hands unfolded. That was the first crack. This is a delay tactic, Patricia Voss said briskly. My client has been more than patient through this process. Mr. Marsh had every opportunity to raise concerns during discovery and chose not to. I chose not to because I needed to make sure I had everything, I said. I wasn't going to bring this forward until I was certain. Certain of what? Patricia asked. That the person sitting across from me and the person 2 chairs down from her conspired together to defraud me of my own company while I was recovering from open-heart surgery. Nobody moved. Gerald, the mediator, looked at the folder like it might bite him. Ryan spoke first. His voice came out steady, which I gave him credit for. Walter, I don't know what you think you have, but you don't have to say anything right now, Ryan. I turned back to Gerald. I'd like you to look at the bank records on page 3. Specifically the wire transfers made between March and August of last year. From the Marsh Construction operating account to a private LLC registered in Delaware. Gerald opened the folder. He read for a moment. His expression changed in the slow, deliberate way that a door closes in a storm. Then he looked up at Diane, then at Ryan. And Diane's face did something I had never seen it do in 38 years of marriage. It went completely blank, like a screen that had just lost power. The performance was over and she didn't have another one ready. Let me tell you how I got here, because the courtroom moment is only half the story. The other half is the 11 months before it, which were the hardest months of my life, and also the months that showed me exactly who I was dealing with. My name is Walter Marsh. I am 63 years old. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, the son of a roofer who taught me that if you do the job right the first time, you never have to apologize for it. I moved to Tucson, Arizona when I was 24, because a friend told me the construction market was wide open, and he wasn't wrong. I started Marsh Construction with $11,000 I had saved over 3 years and a reputation for showing up when I said I would. I met Diane at a hardware supplier's open house in 1986. She was 22, working in the office there, and she had a laugh that could fill a room. We got married 14 months later. Our daughter Claire was born in 1989. For a long time we were happy. I believe that. I want to be clear about that, because what came later does not erase what came before, even if it reframes it. The business grew. The early 2000s I had 18 employees and contracts with 2 commercial developers. By 2015, we were doing $3 million in revenue some years. I had worked every day of my adult life to build that, early mornings, weekends, missing dinners and school plays because a job had run long or a crew needed managing. Diane had not been involved in the business. That was her choice, and I had respected it. She raised Claire and kept the house and built a social life that I was often too tired to fully participate in. That was the shape of our marriage. In 2019, Claire brought home a young man named Ryan Kowalski. He was 30, an account manager at a mid-size logistics firm, personable in the way that makes people trust you quickly. I liked him well enough. Claire seemed happy. They got married in 2021, and I walked my daughter down the aisle with my whole heart in it. 18 months later, Diane told me she wanted a divorce. There was no argument before it, no dramatic confrontation. She sat across from me at the kitchen table one morning in September and told me she hadn't been happy for a long time and she wanted to separate. She said it with the same tone she used to tell me we needed a new water heater. I sat there and I tried to find the version of this I understood and I couldn't find it. I asked if there was someone else. She said no. I asked if she wanted to try counseling. She said it was past that point. She had a lawyer by the end of the week. The heart attack had happened 8 months earlier, in January. I was at the job site on a Tuesday morning when my chest felt like someone had placed a cinder block on it and decided to press. Triple bypass surgery. 6 weeks of cardiac rehabilitation, another 3 months of modified activity. I had come frighteningly close to dying, and I knew it, and I think part of me assumed that would bring Diane and me closer. Instead, she had apparently used my recovery period to make plans. At first, I did what my attorney Douglas told me to do. I let the process move forward. I reviewed the financials she was requesting, assembled the documentation, cooperated fully. I was tired and I was heartbroken and I was 62 years old and I just wanted it to be over. But something kept bothering me. Ryan had offered, shortly after the separation was announced, to help manage some of the administrative side of Marsh Construction while I was still rebuilding my strength. He had come to me with it personally, said he wanted to help, said he knew how much the business meant to me and he didn't want to see it suffer because I was going through a difficult time. I thought that was generous. I thought it was what a son-in-law did. What I noticed, about 4 months in, was that the quarterly numbers didn't look right. I have been running a construction business for 37 years. I know what our overhead looks like. I know what a normal margin is on a commercial roofing contract. The numbers Ryan had been sending me in his weekly updates were plausible enough that I might have missed it if I hadn't spent 4 decades reading these exact kinds of figures. But they were off. Not dramatically, not in a way that would flag itself to an outside reviewer. Just slightly, consistently off. I didn't say anything to Ryan. I didn't say anything to Diane or to Claire. I called a forensic accountant named Bernadette Cho, who had done work for a developer I knew, and I asked her to take a quiet look at our books. She called me back in 3 days. "Walter," she said, "you need to hear this in person." I drove to her office and she walked me through it for 2 hours. Between March and August of that year, while I was recovering from bypass surgery and trusting my son-in-law to help manage operations, someone with authorization codes that had been created under my name had moved $240,000 from the Marsh Construction operating account to a Delaware LLC called RKM Ventures. The transfers were structured in increments small enough to avoid automatic flags, spaced irregularly so there was no obvious pattern. Whoever had done this knew exactly what they were doing. RKM Ventures. Ryan Kowalski Marsh. He had put my name in the company name, which was either arrogance or a kind of insurance policy, and I still haven't figured out which. Bernadette handed me a second document. There were also signatures on 3 subcontractor agreements signed in my name between April and July. She had compared them to my known signature samples. They did not match. "Forgery," I said. "Almost certainly. How would someone get access to do this?" She looked at me steadily. "Someone who had the login credentials for your accounting system and the company accounts. Someone you had given access to while you were recovering." "Ryan," I said. "That's who the authorization trail points to. But Walter." She hesitated. The access he used was linked to an email account that had been set up 6 months before you gave him authorization, before you had the heart attack. Someone had been planning this for a while. I sat with that for a long moment. Before the heart attack. Before Diane told me she wanted a divorce. Before? I said. You're telling me before I gave him any access, there was already an account set up? Yes. How would he have gotten the information he needed to set that up? She didn't answer, but she didn't have to. There are moments in life when you understand something, and the understanding doesn't come with noise. It comes with silence. A very specific silence, like the air going out of a room. I sat in Bernadette's office in the quiet, and I understood that my wife and my son-in-law had been planning this before my heart attack. Possibly before I was even in the hospital. Possibly while I was in surgery and Diane was sitting in the waiting room with our daughter and looking appropriately worried. I drove home and I didn't tell anyone. I hired an investigator named Pete Salazar, retired Pima County Sheriff's deputy, compact and methodical, the kind of man who does not editorialize. I told him I needed to know the nature of the relationship between my estranged wife and my son-in-law. I told him to take whatever time he needed, but to be thorough. He came back to me in 6 weeks. I'm sorry to have to show you this, he said. He handed me a folder with photographs and a log of dates and locations going back 14 months. The Marriott on East Grant, a rental property in Marana. Dinner twice at a restaurant in Scottsdale where neither of them had told anyone they were going. 14 months. Our daughter had married Ryan 13 months before the separation. Diane and Ryan had been involved before Claire and Ryan's wedding. Possibly at the wedding itself, I didn't want to do the exact math, and possibly in every month that followed, all through the period when Diane was telling Claire how happy she was for her, how much she liked Ryan, how grateful she was that Claire had found someone good. I put the photographs back in the folder, and I held onto the edge of Pete's desk for a moment. Does your client know? Pete asked. Your daughter? No, I don't believe so. What are you going to do? I'm going to give this to my attorney, I said. And then I'm going to wait for the right moment. Douglas Firth read through everything and then sat back in his chair and said, Walter, you have criminal fraud here, forgery, and the financial trail is documented. We can report this to the AG's office and pursue civil recovery separately from the divorce. But if you want to use this in the divorce proceedings, the element of surprise matters. If they find out you have this before the final mediation, they'll restructure everything. So we wait. We wait. I went home to my apartment, the one I was renting 6 miles from the house I had owned for 22 years. And I cooked myself dinner and I watched the news and I thought about my daughter, who was currently living with a man who had been sleeping with her mother. I thought about that every day for the next 5 months. Every time Claire called me to check on my health, every time she told me Ryan sent his regards, every time I had to sit at a table with both of them at some family obligation and watch Ryan shake my hand and ask how I was holding up. I held up. That was all I could do. Back in the mediation room, Gerald the mediator had read the bank records twice. He set the folder down and looked at Patricia Voss with an expression that had shifted from inconvenience to something much more serious. Counsel, he said, I need to pause this session. These documents raise concerns that go beyond the scope of what we can resolve here. Patricia had been whispering with Diane. She straightened up. Your Honor, these documents haven't been authenticated. They've been introduced at the last possible moment. They were authenticated by a licensed forensic accountant, Douglas said calmly, and we have the chain of custody documentation. We also have a declaration from a licensed private investigator and comparative signature analysis from a certified documents examiner. Gerald turned to Ryan. Sir, are you a party to this proceeding? Ryan had gone very still. He was 42 years old and fit, and he had the kind of easy confidence that I imagine had made Diane feel something she hadn't felt in years. That confidence was not present right now. No, he said. I'm here as family. Are you affiliated with an entity called RKM Ventures LLC? Silence. I'd like to remind you, Gerald said, that making false statements in a legal proceeding carries consequences. Ryan looked at Diane. It was the first time he'd looked at her since I'd slid the folder across the table. She did not look back at him. She was looking at her hands, which were folded again, but differently this time. Tightly, the knuckles pale. "I want to speak to an attorney," Ryan said. Gerald adjourned the session and requested that both parties make themselves available for a follow-up proceeding. Patricia Voss asked for 3 days. Douglas said we had no objection. As people began gathering their things, Diane finally looked at me across the table. Her expression was not what I expected. I had anticipated defiance or calculation, or even contempt, the tools she had used throughout this process. What I saw instead was something closer to exhaustion. Like a person who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and has finally set it down, not because they chose to, but because they physically couldn't hold it anymore. "Crawford?" she started, then stopped. "My name is Walter," I said quietly. "You know that." She didn't say anything else. The part that nobody tells you about these moments is that winning doesn't feel the way you imagined it would. I had spent 11 months building toward this. I had imagined some version of satisfaction, of justice, delivered with clean edges. What I actually felt, sitting in my car in the parking structure afterward, was just tired. Not defeated. Not sad, exactly. Just tired in the way you get tired after you've been holding tension in your body for so long that releasing it leaves you hollow. My phone rang. It was Claire. I let it ring twice, 3 times, and then I answered. "Dad?" Her voice was careful. "Ryan just called me. He said something happened at the mediation. He said you showed up with documents that accused him of something." "I know." He said it's not true. He said you've been upset about the divorce and you're trying to make things difficult. "Claire," he said. "Claire, I need you to come see me. Not tonight. Tomorrow, when you've had time to sleep on this. I have things to show you, and I need to show you in person." "What kind of things?" "The kind a father doesn't want to have to show his daughter, but the kind you have to know." She was quiet for a long moment. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Tomorrow." She came at 10 in the morning. She sat at my kitchen table, and I made coffee, and I put the folders in front of her the way Bernadette had put them in front of me, deliberately and without preamble. The bank records first. Then Bernadette's analysis. Then Pete Salazar's report. I did not show her the photographs immediately. I let her work through the financial documents first. She was smart, my daughter, had always been sharp with numbers, and I watched her expression change as she read the small, efficient movements of someone who is doing arithmetic they don't want to finish. "Dad," she said finally, "this is from our company accounts?" "Yes." "And Ryan had access because you gave it to him?" "Yes." She set down the financial pages. She looked at the investigator's report, which was the next page in the stack, and she read the first paragraph. Then she stopped. She was very still for a moment. She kept reading. I got up and refilled my coffee and gave her the time she needed. Outside the window, a pair of mourning doves was doing what mourning doves do, completely indifferent to the fact that my daughter's life was reorganizing itself around information she had not asked to receive. When I came back to the table, Claire had closed the folder. Her face had the same quality I had seen in Diane's the day before. That hollowed-out look of someone who has put something down that was too heavy for too long. Except Claire had only been carrying it for 10 minutes, and she didn't even know the weight of it yet. She looked up at me. "How long?" she asked. "Based on what Pete found," I said carefully. "At least 14 months. 14 months, she repeated. "That means before. Before the wedding." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Her voice was very quiet when she spoke again. "Mom knew about the money? She had the account information. How much she directed versus Ryan, that's something investigators will have to sort out. But the LLC has both their names connected to it." Claire put her hand over her mouth for a moment. Then she took it away. "Did you know at the wedding?" "No. I found out gradually, starting about 7 months ago. So you sat across from him at Thanksgiving?" "Yes." "At my birthday dinner?" "Yes." "You hugged him and shook his hand, and you knew." I needed to wait until the legal documentation was complete, I said. I needed to make sure I had everything before I said anything to anyone. Especially to you. She stood up and walked to the window. She stood there for a while. The doves had flown off. The backyard of my rental was just a strip of gravel and a half-dead Palo Verde tree that was not my problem. I keep trying to find the version of this where it makes sense, she said. I know. Like there's some explanation I haven't heard yet. There might be explanations, Claire. There aren't excuses. She turned around. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. She had always been someone who cried later, privately, where she didn't have to manage it in front of anyone. I got that from somewhere, I suspected. What happens now? To them? Douglas has filed a report with the Arizona Attorney General's office. The fraud and forgery case will be investigated separately from the divorce proceedings. The divorce itself will be restructured from the ground up based on accurate financials. Will they go to jail? Potentially. That depends on the DA's office and how cooperative they are. Bernadette's analysis is solid. The forgery evidence is solid. Pete's documentation is solid. If I were their attorney, I would advise them to take whatever deal was offered. And you? What do you want? I want my company back, I said. I want the money that was taken returned. I want the record to show what actually happened. That's what I want. She looked at me for a long moment. Is that really all? I thought about it honestly. 11 months of sitting with this, watching and waiting, building the case, swallowing every conversation where Ryan asked about my health with what I now understood was strategic interest. Every dinner where Diane updated Claire on the divorce proceedings with an air of injured dignity, every moment I had to perform normalcy while knowing exactly what I knew. I want your mother to have to live with what she did, I said. Not just the legal consequences, but the knowledge that I know, that you know, that it's on the record. I want the lie to be over. That matters to me. Claire nodded. She came back to the table and sat down. She said she was sorry. Quietly, directly, looking at me without flinching. Not for what they had done, which was not hers to apologize for. She said she was sorry that I had carried this alone for almost a year. Sorry that she hadn't seen it. Sorry that I had been put in the position of having to show her this at all. Claire, I said, none of this is yours to carry. She's my mother. What she did is hers, not yours. He's my husband. Not for much longer, I suspect. She almost smiled, then she didn't. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. My daughter, who had grown up watching me work double Saturdays to pay for her school trips, who had learned to mix concrete at 10 years old because she wanted to help, who had graduated from the University of Arizona and made me cry in the parking lot outside the ceremony where I managed not to cry. I'm going to need some time, she said. Take whatever you need. But I'm not going anywhere. I know, sweetheart. The Arizona Attorney General's office opened a formal investigation 8 weeks later. The forensic accounting firm was retained by the state as an independent reviewer. Bernadette Cho's analysis held up under scrutiny. Additional records surfaced during the investigation that Bernadette and I hadn't even found. 3 more transfers that had been made through a second entity Ryan had set up. Smaller amounts, more carefully hidden. Total taken from Marsh Construction over the 14-month period came to $312,000. Ryan hired a criminal defense attorney and declined to answer questions initially. Then he changed strategy and agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced charge. That cooperation included a signed statement laying out the full sequence of events, including the role Diane had played in identifying which accounts to access and when transfers could be made without my noticing. She had known the business well enough from 38 years of being married to it, even if she had never formally worked in it. She knew my rhythms, knew when I reviewed statements, knew which vendors I tracked closely. She had fed that knowledge to Ryan, and Ryan had used it. That was the precise, ugly mechanics of it. Diane was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and wire fraud. Ryan was charged with fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Both took plea agreements. Ryan received 18 months in a federal minimum security facility and 3 years probation. Diane received 24 months probation, a significant fine, and was required to make full restitution. The divorce settlement was renegotiated from scratch. Diane received nothing from Marsh Construction. The restitution order covered a substantial portion of what had been taken. My attorneys pursued civil recovery for the remainder and reached a judgment that will be collected over time. I moved back into my house 6 months after the mediation session, after the court had confirmed the property was mine and the locks had been changed. The first thing I did was open all the windows, because the house had been closed up and it smelled like nothing I recognized. My house, smelling like someone else's life. It took about a week for it to start feeling like mine again. Claire filed for divorce from Ryan the month his plea agreement was finalized. She did not tell me about the filing ahead of time. She texted me the night before the paperwork was submitted, and the text said, "Dad, I just wanted you to know that tomorrow I'm filing. I'm okay. I'll call you this weekend." I spent the evening after getting that text sitting in my kitchen with a cup of coffee I didn't drink, thinking about my daughter at 34 years old, dismantling a marriage she had believed in, and trying to find a way to be angry at the right people and not the wrong ones. We talked that weekend for 2 hours. She was doing what Claire does, moving through the practical steps efficiently, keeping the emotional weight contained until she could deal with it on her own terms. She had good people around her. Friends, a therapist she had started seeing. She told me that the hardest part was not the betrayal itself, which was enormous and would take years to fully process, but the retrospective rewriting, going back through 4 years of memories and understanding that certain things she had thought were real had not been. "I know something about that," I told her. "I know you do," she said. "Is it always that disorienting?" "For a while, yes. Then you start separating what was real from what wasn't. The feelings you had were real," I said. "The love you had for him was real. That doesn't disappear just because he wasn't who you thought he was. The lie is his. The love was yours." She was quiet on the line. Then she said, "How did you know how to do that? Just hold it together and wait and do the right thing?" "I didn't always know," I told her honestly. "Some days I just ate dinner and went to bed and got up the next morning and did it again." We talked for a while longer and then we said goodnight, and I sat in my kitchen in my house that smelled like my house again, and I thought about what it cost to do things the right way. Not just financially. Not just legally, but in the body. The weight of knowing and not yet acting. The discipline of waiting when everything in you wants to name what you know. The isolation of carrying information that would break the people you love and understanding that the timing of breaking them matters, that how the truth is delivered shapes how it can be survived. I had turned 63 in the middle of all of it. My daughter brought me a cake to my rental apartment, and we ate it at my kitchen table, and Ryan was there, and he shook my hand and asked how I was feeling since the surgery, and I told him I was feeling much better, and I thanked him for asking, and I meant none of it. I remember thinking, while I was eating birthday cake across from a man who had taken $300,000 from the company I built, that I had better not die before this was finished. That seemed important. Not to die before I had the chance to close this particular door. I didn't die. The door is closed. Marsh Construction is fully operational. Revenue was down for about 8 months while I worked through the legal proceedings and reasserted control, but the company had good bones and loyal people, and it came back. I promoted my operations manager, a woman named Gretchen who had been with me for 11 years, to co-director. Best decision I made in all of this. Gretchen ran things during the months when I couldn't, and she ran them right, and she never once asked me a question that wasn't strictly necessary. I am 63 years old, and I just signed a 2-year contract with a commercial developer in the East Valley that will keep 2 crews employed for the better part of 24 months. I work reasonable hours now. I see my doctor every 4 months. My heart, the surgeon told me at my last checkup, is performing well given what it's been through. Claire is doing better. She sold the house she and Ryan had bought together and moved into a place near mine, which was not planned, but which I will not pretend I am sorry about. She comes for dinner on Sunday nights, and sometimes she stays late, and we watch something on television, and she falls asleep on the couch the way she used to when she was in high school. and I cover her with a blanket and let her sleep because she is my daughter and she is healing, and there is nothing more important to me in the world than the fact that she is still here. 3 weeks ago, she brought me something, a framed photograph, the kind you have printed at a proper shop. It was the two of us at a job site when she was maybe 11, both of us in hard hats that were too big for us, squinting into the sun. I don't even remember who took it. On the back, in her handwriting, she had written, "You built this. Nobody can take it. Love, Claire." It's hanging in my office now, above my desk. I think sometimes about the version of this where I signed those papers in that mediation room. The version where I was tired enough and heartbroken enough and just 63 years old enough to let it go. That version exists. I felt it. There were mornings in the middle of those 11 months where the thought of it was almost appealing. Just sign and let it be over, let them have what they wanted, walk away from all of it. Those mornings were real. But I've worked with my hands for 40 years, and I know the difference between something that's been built solid and something that's been cut short to save time. You know it when you come back to it years later. What was rushed shows. What was skipped shows. A thing done right, done all the way it holds. I held. If you're watching this, and you're in the middle of something that feels too long and too heavy and too uncertain, I want to tell you what I know from standing on the other side of it. The waiting is the hardest part, and it is also the part that matters most. It's easy to act when you're angry. It's much harder to be patient when you're angry, to keep your head clear, to build what you need to build quietly and do it right. But that patience is not passivity. It is not acceptance. It is a form of discipline that the people who wronged you are counting on you not to have. Don't give them that. Document everything. Find people you trust absolutely and trust no one else. Take care of your health because you need to be standing when this is over. And understand that the goal is not just to win in the moment. It's to still be standing 10 years from now with something real and solid that you can put your hands on and say, "This is mine. I built this. Nobody took it." That's the victory. Not the papers filed or the charges accepted or the look on someone's face when they realize they've run out of moves. Those are satisfying, I won't lie to you. But they're not the thing. The thing is Claire asleep on my couch on a Sunday night. The thing is Gretchen forwarding me next week's crew schedule because she knows I like to look it over before Monday. The thing is coming to work in the morning at a company with my name on it that still exists and still runs and still does the job right. That's the thing. Everything else is just paperwork.